hopelessly poisoned politically. To discuss that, let's bring in conservative radio host and Republican strategist Ken Vecchio and criminal defense attorney Nicole DeBoard. And Ken, first of all, last night at the White House, Justice Kavanaugh went out of his way to thank every Republican senator that got him confirmed. The president said that Kavanaugh had been fully exonerated, that the evidence had exonerated him. Not that it was inconclusive, but exonerated. That sounds pretty political.
No, I think that the president is speaking in terms of justice. In my opinion, the evidence did exonerate him. You have, first of all, a woman who had major memory deficits. She didn't remember where it was, when it was. More so, it came from a retrieved memory, which is inherently unreliable. But the biggest part is the evidence was completely uncorroborated.
But there's a difference between evidence being uncorroborated and evidence being conclusive and fully exonerating. But Nicole, how about you? Did you see this as a political event Monday night? And if so, is there a problem with it?
You know, if it seemed more political than it needed to be. And the reality is that the Supreme Court is absolutely not a place for politics. There's going to be a long road back for Justice Kavanaugh from the hearings and from the testimony that he provided, because while there were a great many people who very much agreed with his side of what was going on, there are many who feel disenfranchised. And there is always the concern with the highest court that all of the justices will take each issue before them and handle it in a fair, neutral, and balanced way. And it sounds like today, in the first argument that he had, he made some steps toward demonstrating that type of neutrality that we all expect from our justices.
So, Nicole, what's your view of the Supreme Court now? Do you necessarily see this institution as stained or partisan?
I don't. You know, I'm holding out hope that what we're going to see is more of what we saw today, in the sense that we're going to hear questions and we're going to see opinions that demonstrate that he is going to hold to his promise to try to be a fair and neutral justice.
Let's be honest.
He's got a long road back.
Hold on. Let's be honest here. First of all, I don't think he's got a long road back to anything. He's now on the Supreme Court of the United States. As you heard Dan talk about, there were 20 people out there protesting. Things are going to go on. Politically, there's going to be a big overhaul that's going to come out of this. I mean, this is going to determine the elections in November. But this guy, he's going to go on. And when I was saying let's get real and be honest about something, what I'm talking about is this. At the end of the day, these are still 9 people who had political thoughts before they became on the court, and they have them now. I'm very hopeful that Roe versus Wade is going to be overturned because of Kavanaugh, and I'm less concerned about him. It's more maybe John Roberts that won't go that direction.
Well, on the issue, Nicole, of whether or not the court is political or not, and you suggested that, no, maybe they're above it, wouldn't it have made more sense, therefore, for the Supreme Court justices not to go to the White House last night? I mean, some of them looked like they were held captive there while the president was making a very political speech. They added to that by essentially being props for the president. Why would they do that if they're not a political body?
Well, the reality is that it is not uncommon for justices to have ceremonies at the White House. And Kavanaugh is certainly not the first justice to have a ceremony at the White House when he took the bench. And Justice Kagan had one before him. There are many of the justices that have been on the Supreme Court and are on the Supreme Court now.
But not in prime time. Not in prime time, and not with the president making as much of a political statement as Donald Trump made last night. But can you talk me off the ledge?
Look, I think it's a fallacy. I think it's a fallacy at the end of the day that they're not political. Everybody wants to think about judges not being political, but every judge gets to the bench by being political, whether it's the lowest bench or it's the highest bench. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as they don't let their politics get imputed into their decisions. At the end of the day, though, everybody is a human being who's got their own embedded thought processes politically. And I am very hopeful that the entire court will look at things first and foremost from a constitutional standard. I think that they largely do. However, sometimes you come up with crazy decisions that really are not rooted in Constitution or the law, but just in people's own moral values.
Nicole, how did you feel when the president apologized on behalf of the nation for what Kavanaugh and his family had to go through? Are you sorry for the confirmation process?
You know, I think the confirmation process did, in fact, do a great deal of damage to the reputation of our highest court, no matter what side of this you fall on. The reality is that while all of these are human beings, they're justices who are supposed to be neutral arbiters of the things that come before them in our highest court. So you know, this was a rocky road to get here, and I do feel that he is going to do everything that he can to try to show us in his rulings and his demeanor in the court that what we saw in those confirmation hearings is not a harbinger of what we can expect.
Nicole, I agree with you. I do think that it damaged the court, but in my view, and Ken, I'll address this to you, Brett Kavanaugh bears some responsibility for that because he responded in a very partisan way to some very emotionally charged accusations against him. He talked about what goes around comes around. That is as red meat politics as you get.
I think Brett Kavanaugh was a man who was falsely accused. He acted in the manner that somebody who is falsely accused would. He was indignant about it. He was upset about it. His family, we got to think about really what happened to his family. I mean, this wasn't just embarrassing. This guy was attacked at the highest level.
Even his tone yesterday was on the defense.
Yeah, maybe he's just a defensive guy, but I think it does create the perception that he is a political beast first and foremost and not a judge or a justice. We'll see how it plays out. Kenneth, Vecchio, we got to leave it there. Nicole DeBoard, thank you as well for coming in. We appreciate it. Good to have you both.
Absolutely.
Still ahead, Florida's Panhandle is expected to take a direct hit from Hurricane Michael.